Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about gardening, botanical history, and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is May 20th, and there are just 31 days until the first day of summer. Today we celebrate a prolific French writer and poet remembered for his realism, and in his little home and garden, now a Paris museum. We'll also learn a little history lesson about the Chelsea Flower Show, and we'll hear an excerpt from a beloved children's story. And we grow that garden library today with an artistic look at flowers through the eyes of a modern artist. And then we'll wrap things up with National Pick Strawberries Day. So make sure that's on your calendar, and if not, find a strawberry patch near you. But first, here's today's curated news. Today's curated news comes to us from Gardenista. This is a post by Meredith Swinehart, and it's called Architects Roundup 10 Garden Stairways. Well, unless you are blessed with a flat piece of property, most of us need to incorporate some type of stairway in our gardens, and this can be a major conundrum. You know, my dear neighbor across the street has never done this, and instead they have a very steep slope on either side of their property, which they have to regularly mow. And this past October, my dear friend was going to walk to her backyard, and she slipped on the wet grass and broke her ankle in 3 places. It was a very, very bad break. And she's my age, which made me especially concerned for her. And I have to say, it's been a very, very difficult recovery. But one of the things that they're looking at doing this summer is putting in a garden stairway so that this type of accident doesn't happen again. And now I know, because I'm helping her through this process, that installing a garden stairway can be a very expensive endeavor. And so these 10 ideas that are featured here on Gardenista range from the simple and non-expensive to the very elaborate and very expensive. And so there's a nice cadre of options that are listed here. And hopefully, if you're thinking of installing a garden stairway, you'll find a little bit of inspiration, if not the solution that you're looking for. Now, that said, of course, many of these options feature stone. Stone is a very long-lasting and durable solution for garden stairs. Some of these have a nice mix of either paver landings or grass landings, depending on your ability to get the mower into those locations. Wood is also another option. And I want to draw your attention to a very beautiful concrete stairway that's featured in this post. And what they did here is they painted the concrete black. Now, if I were in your shoes and I was just listening to this podcast, I would think, black concrete. I don't know if that's something I would like in the garden. But I have to tell you that these steps not only look fantastic in this landscape, but they really make the green of the garden pop. So check this out if you're at all interested in black concrete as an option in your garden. And I also want to just mention here really quickly that one of the images shows a stepped walking trail using wood dividers. And that too is a very straightforward and simple solution. But if it's done right, it can be very effective. And it can almost blend naturally into the landscape. It can seem like it's been there forever. And this can be in contrast to a stone pathway, where if you're using an element that isn't native or doesn't look right in the space, it can just seem out of position and disrupt the flow of your landscape. So picking the right material is very, very important. Now, one last thing that I want to share with you about a garden stairway that's a very nice element to add or incorporate into the stairway is lighting. And there's a picture here of a stairway at a Connecticut vacation home that very tastefully incorporates lighted lanterns as a way to light the stairs. And so that's great as well because you're minimizing tripping or falling in the darkness in the garden. So consider that as well if you're doing stairs in your garden and you intend to try to navigate those in the evening. All right, that's it for today's curated news. You can find this great article written by Meredith Swinehart over at Gardenista in the Facebook group for the show. I'll have a link to it there. Just type in the number 10 because Meredith is featuring 10 garden stairways, and this post will pop right up. And then you can read all about it and check out the pictures and all of the detail around these 10 stairway options for you to find inspiration or solutions for your garden. Now, if you're not in the Facebook group, you can always join. All you need to do is head on up to the search bar where you'd search for a friend. The next time you're in Facebook, just type in the words Daily Gardener Community and then request to join. You'll have a few questions to answer, like how did you find the podcast and what do you like about it? And then once you answer those questions, I'll admit you into the group. And I can't wait to meet you and your garden there. It's time for today's Botanical History. Here's Botanical History for today, May 20th. Today is the birthday of the prolific 19th century French writer, poet, and the father of realism in French literature, Honoré de Balzac. Today, Maison de Balzac, or Honoré's modest Paris home, has been turned into a museum. The house, with its courtyard and garden, faces the Eiffel Tower and was a refuge for Honoré, who rented the top floor under his housekeeper's name. The home had multiple exits, which allowed Honoré to quickly flee his creditors. Honoré's friends had to use a password to be able to gain access to the house to visit him. Today, a bust of Honoré de Balzac stands in the little garden where fans of his work can sit and enjoy refreshments during their visit. Honoré's bust is framed by laurel shrubs, which is a nod to the pivotal women named Laure in Honoré's life. His mother, Laure, his younger sister, Laurence, his older sister, Laure, and his lover and faithful champion, Laure du Bernay, who was 1 year older than his mother. Now, Honoré's house is one of 3 home museums for French literary greats, along with the homes of Honoré's dear friend Victor Hugo and George Sand. Today, Honoré's 5-room apartment contains his writing desk and chair, as well as his tea kettle and a coffee pot. Honoré was a notorious coffee drinker and a night owl as he wrote his masterpieces. But for Honoré's fans, his most famous possession was his oversized gold and turquoise-studded cane. The handle looks like it's covered in forget-me-nots. Honoré's cane created a sensation in 1834 Paris, and soon fancy walking sticks were the standard of fashion for gentlemen. When Honoré was alive, his home smelled of pears. Honoré loved pears, and he stockpiled 1,500 pears in his pantry. And in his garden, Honoré picked violets and lilacs for the woman he would ultimately marry, Evelina Hanska. Their tragic love story was chronicled in their many letters to each other, which altogether read like a novel. And although she was married, Evelina had started the affair by writing an anonymous fan letter to Honoré. Honoré and Evelina's relationship was forged in nearly 2 decades worth of letters to each other. And over the course of those 20 years, they'd only met in person 8 times before they eventually married. Sadly, 5 short months after their wedding, Honoré died in Paris in 1850. In terms of his work, gardeners should know that Honoré's 1835 book, Lily of the Valley, has nothing to do with the woodland plant that was used by Dior to create their famous fragrance in 1956. Instead, Honoré's book tells the story of an unconsummated love, and the title was inspired by the Bible verse from the Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verses 1 through 2. It goes like this: I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. As the lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. Today, gardeners can remember Honoré in the Honoré de Balzac rose, which is a pink blend hybrid tea rose introduced in the United States by Conrad Pyle of Star Roses in 1996. In 1845, Honoré wrote, "A young bride is like a plucked flower, but a guilty wife is like a flower that has been walked over." And he also wrote, "Love has its own instinct, finding the way to the heart, as the feeblest insect finds the way to its flower, with a will which nothing can dismay or turn aside." Finally, here's a little verse from Honoré's poem called The Camellia. In nature's poem, flowers have each their word. The rose of love and beauty sings alone. The violet's soul exhales in tenderest tone. The lily's one pure, simple note heard. Yet in a theater or ballroom light, I gladly see camellias shining bright above some stately woman's raven hair, whose noble form fulfills the heart's desire, like Grecian marbles warmed by Phidian fire. And it was on this day, May 20th, in 1913, that the first Chelsea Flower Show was held at Chelsea General Hospital. Originally called the Royal Horticultural Society's Great Spring Show, the first Chelsea Flower Show was held in 1862 at the RHS Garden in Kensington. Staged in a single tent, the first show made a profit of £88. It's time for today's Unearthed Words. Today's Unearthed Words come to us from the English journalist, short story writer, poet, and novelist Rudyard Kipling. This is an excerpt from his children's book called Rikki-Tikki Tavi. Rikki-Tikki had a right to be proud of himself, but he did not grow too proud, and he kept a garden as a mongoose should keep it, with tooth and jump and spring and bite, till never a cobra dared show its head inside the walls. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Petal by Adriana Picker. This book came out in 2020, and the subtitle is A World of Flowers Through the Artist's Eye. Well, let me begin by saying that this book is absolutely gorgeous, and it contains original artwork by Adriana Picker. And I love that her last name is Picker and that the title of this book is Petal. Somehow that goes together. Now, as I just mentioned, Adriana is an artist. She's a botanical illustrator, and in this book, she is featuring the petals from all sorts of flowers, from simple daisies to exotic lilies, and she features all kinds of angles in her work. You're going to see close-ups, cross-sections, flowers in bud, foliage that reveals the flower's unique characteristics. You're going to see architectural beauty, incredible colors, and texture that leaps off the page. She writes about things like the fame of particular flowers, the folklore and traditions that surround certain blossoms. She discusses the scent of flowers and florography, which is the meaning and symbolism that is behind some of our favorite blooms, in addition to some just fun facts and flower trivia. And you know, another feature that I especially appreciate about Adriana's book is that she organizes her work by plant family. So she first covers the rose family and the legume family, and then she moves into the daisy family, the nightshade family, the orchid family, and so on. And I thought you'd enjoy getting a little taste of this personal story from Adriana that she shares in the introduction to her book. She writes, "When I was 5 years old, my maternal grandmother, Emma, announced to my mother that I would be a florist. And every time I visited my grandmother, we would spend hours together in her beautiful garden hunting for blossoms. Well, I did not have very long in Emma's garden. She died when I was 7, and my grandfather sold the home. And on the day of her funeral, her roses were in full glorious bloom, and I collected a huge bunch for the dining table. My Aunt Margot made me point out each rose bush I had picked from so that she could move them to her own garden in memory of her mother. My botanical education continued after Emma's death, furthered by my mother, Sally, also an avid gardener." Now, isn't that a wonderful glimpse into the early inspiration behind Adriana's work and art? I love that story. This book is 256 pages of beautiful, lush botanical art from a woman with a lifelong passion for flowers, plants, and botanical illustrations. You can get a copy of Petal by Adriana Picker and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $26. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day and every May 20th, National Pick Strawberries Day is observed. Here are a few fun facts about this beloved sweet fruit. First, the etymology of the name strawberry is likely a corruption of the phrase strewn berry. This would be a reference to the way the plant produced prolifically thanks to runners, resulting in berries that were strewn about the ground. Fragaria is a little-known word, and it means the fear of strawberries. Now, in terms of their uniqueness, strawberries are the only fruit that wear their seeds on the outside, and the average strawberry has 200 seeds. Strawberries are perennial, and they're members of the rose family, and the strawberry flower averages 5 to 7 petals. Now, in terms of harvesting, strawberry plants are hand-picked about every 3 days, and a single acre of land can grow almost 50,000 pounds of strawberries. California produces 1 billion pounds of strawberries every year, which means that 75% of the American strawberry crop is grown in California, with Florida and North Carolina in second and third place. As for strawberry quotes, the author Toni Morrison once wrote, "I have only to break into the tightness of a strawberry and I see summer, its dust and lowering skies." And the author Tsugumi Oba of the Death Note box set wrote, "If you keep my secret, this strawberry is yours." Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove and Wyoming, Minnesota. If you want to read today's show notes, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. And don't forget that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can always get in touch by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.